They once ruled the screen. Now most people don't even remember their names. Fame is cruel. One moment, the world chants your name under glowing marquees. The next, your legacy fades into static and silence. These 10 stars weren't just background extras. They were box office gold, pin-ups on every soldier's locker, legends in their time. But time is merciless. It erased their faces, buried their stories, and left them as whispers in Hollywood's forgotten alleys. Some of them turned down iconic roles that could have changed everything. Others died tragically, burned alive, overdosed, or simply vanished from public memory. And the saddest part? Today's audiences wouldn't even blink walking past their names on a walk of fame. Welcome to Vintage Hollywood Files, where we uncover the beauty, the tragedy, and the shadows behind the spotlight. Before we begin, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. We love seeing our classic film family from all over the world. And now, let's bring these lost legends back to the light. Because even if the world forgot them, we won't. Number 1. George Raft. He danced his way into stardom, but couldn't outrun the shadows. George Raft was once one of the highest-paid leading men in Hollywood, known for his tough guy charm, slicked-back hair, and mysterious aura that made women swoon and directors eager. Before the lights of Hollywood, he was a dancer in New York's smoky speakeasies, sharing drinks and secrets with real-life mobsters, men who would later serve as the inspiration behind many of his most iconic gangster roles. But Raft wasn't just playing the part, he lived it. He was so deeply entangled with organized crime that whispers of his mafia ties followed him throughout his career. And while those connections gave him street credibility, they also terrified studio execs. His name became toxic in boardrooms even as it sizzled in gossip columns. Worse, Raft's fear of tarnishing his image led to some of the worst career decisions in Hollywood history. He turned down Casablanca, The Maltese Falcon, and Double Indemnity, roles that turned his rivals into legends. Pride and paranoia proved to be his undoing. By the 1950s, he was clinging to fame, doing nightclub gigs to survive. He died in 1980, not in luxury, but quietly and forgotten. George Raft was once Hollywood royalty, but in the end, he became a cautionary tale. Drop a 1 if you think Raft's biggest enemy wasn't Hollywood. It was himself. Number 2. Alan Ladd. He was only 5 feet 6 inches, but in Hollywood, Alan Ladd stood taller than most. With a whisper-soft voice and piercing eyes, Ladd wasn't the typical macho leading man of the 1940s. But that's exactly what made him unforgettable. From This Gun for Hire to Shane, he played quiet, brooding heroes who carried the weight of the world in their silences. Off-screen, he was even quieter. Born into poverty, plagued by rejection because of his height, and devastated by the suicide of his father, Alan Ladd built his stardom out of sheer grit. But the shadows of his early life never truly left him. He suffered from chronic depression, bouts of insomnia, and a growing dependence on pills and alcohol to keep going. Despite his fame, Ladd never felt like he belonged in the spotlight. Friends described him as distant, often lost in thought, haunted even. By the late 50s, roles became scarce, and his demons louder. He overdosed in 1962, but survived. 2 years later, alone in a home in Palm Springs, Alan Ladd died from a lethal combination of alcohol and sedatives. He was just 50, the boy who once climbed from nothing to become a silver screen icon. Left without a final curtain call. Drop a 2 in the comments if you think Alan Ladd deserved more than Hollywood ever gave him. Number 3. Dane Clark. They called him the working man's Gary Cooper. But Dane Clark never quite escaped the feeling of being second best. Born Bernard Zanville in Brooklyn, he wasn't born with matinee idol looks. But what he had was raw grit, a sharp jaw, and a voice that made casting directors pay attention. In the 1940s, Clark carved a niche playing streetwise soldiers, desperate drifters, and men caught in moral chaos. He wasn't glamorous, he was real. But Hollywood is cruel to the almost famous. While stars like Bogart and Mitchum soared, Clark's career stalled in the 1950s. Studios shifted gears, and Clark's style, intense, Norrish, working class, was no longer in demand. He tried TV, stage, even directing. But the parts got smaller, the spotlight dimmer. Off-camera, Clark was known for his temper and unwillingness to play studio politics. He spoke his mind, often at his own expense. As the roles dried up, so did the invitations. For a man who once shared the screen with Bette Davis and Humphrey Bogart, his fall into obscurity was swift. Dane Clark spent his final years largely forgotten, battling illness and fading quietly into the past. He died in 1998, a name that once headlined noir thrillers, now mostly whispered by film historians. Ever heard of Dane Clark before today? If yes, drop a 3 and prove you're a true Golden Age fan. Number 4. Elizabeth Scott. She was the queen of noir, a woman whose smoky voice and icy stare made her both irresistible and untouchable. Elizabeth Scott wasn't just another blonde bombshell, she was mystery personified. In the 1940s and early 1950s, Scott starred alongside Burt Lancaster, Humphrey Bogart, and Charlton Heston. She played women with secrets, dangerous, magnetic, always one step ahead. And off-screen? She was just as enigmatic. Scott fiercely protected her private life. Unlike her contemporaries, she rarely gave interviews, avoided the party circuit, and kept her romantic relationships under lock and key. But in 1955, a scandal exploded. Confidential magazine published an article linking her to a list of alleged lesbian lovers. In an era when such rumors could end careers, the story was a career earthquake. She sued for $2.5 million. The case dragged on, but the damage was done. Hollywood, already moving away from noir, quietly stopped calling. Studios feared controversy more than they valued talent. Scott never married, never confirmed or denied the rumors, and never returned to the limelight. She lived the rest of her life in relative seclusion, refusing to explain herself to a world that didn't deserve her truths. She died in 2015 at the age of 92. Still a mystery. Do you think Elizabeth Scott deserved a second act, or did Hollywood silence her too soon? Tell me below. Number 5. Turhan Bey. He was known as the Turkish delight of Hollywood, a heartthrob with exotic charm who became the fantasy of countless fans during the 1940s. But while Turhan Bey's looks turned heads, his career was a fleeting illusion. Born in Vienna to a Turkish father and Czech mother, Turhan Bey arrived in Hollywood with a mysterious aura. His accent, poise, and dark features made him the go-to leading man for Eastern roles in Universal's adventure films. He starred opposite stars like Maria Montez and even Lana Turner, becoming a box office draw in films like Arabian Nights and Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. But his stardom was a product of typecasting. Hollywood loved him as the exotic other, but had no idea what to do with him once those roles fell out of fashion. When World War II ended and audiences moved on from fantasy epics, so did the studios. Just like that, Turhan Bey faded into the background. He returned to Vienna, left acting behind, and became a respected photographer. Decades later, he resurfaced briefly in the 1990s for small TV roles, but the magic was gone, and so was the spotlight. Turhan Bey died in 2012, nearly forgotten by the industry that once built him into a fantasy. Did Hollywood ever truly see him for who he was, or just for who they wanted him to be? Drop a comment if you remember the Turkish delight. Number 6. Linda Darnell. She was called the girl with the perfect face. Linda Darnell, with her dark, smoldering beauty and intense screen presence, captivated audiences in the 1940s with films like Forever Amber and A Letter to Three Wives. But behind that perfect face was a life haunted by disappointment, broken promises, and one of the most tragic endings in Golden Age Hollywood. Darnell began modeling at 11 and was signed by 20th Century Fox before she turned 16. She quickly rose to stardom, but fame came at a heavy cost. Studio executives constantly pressured her to maintain an impossible image. dieting, reshaping her persona, and playing roles that veiled her actual talents. She longed to be a serious actress, but Hollywood insisted she stay the beautiful ornament. Her personal life mirrored her professional struggles. An abusive marriage, alcoholism, and years of fading roles drove her into emotional turmoil. By the 1950s, the phone had stopped ringing. She was living quietly with her former secretary and friend, far removed from the glitz she once embodied. In 1965, while visiting that friend in Illinois, tragedy struck. A house fire broke out. Linda had just watched one of her old movies on TV. She ran into the flames to save others. Her injuries were too severe. She died the next day from burns over 80% of her body. She was just 41. Fame gave her everything and took it all back. Do you think Hollywood ever valued her beyond her looks? Number 7. Bonita Granville. Bonita Granville was once a household name. At just 14 years old, she earned an Academy Award nomination for her chilling performance in These Three, 1936. By her late teens, she had become the definitive Nancy Drew, embodying the beloved teen detective in a series of popular films. She was intelligent, spirited, and full of promise, the kind of young star who seemed destined to define a generation. But Hollywood had other plans. As Bonita matured, the industry didn't know what to do with her. She was too sharp for the damsel roles and too sweet for the vamps. Despite her early success, lead roles dried up. She eventually pivoted to producing alongside her husband Jack Rather, helping bring Lassie to television fame. Yet her on-screen presence faded into the background. She never spiraled like some of her contemporaries. She didn't make headlines for scandals or addiction. Instead, she quietly exited the spotlight, gracefully, almost invisibly. By the time she passed away from cancer in 1988, many who once cheered her name had long forgotten it. Do we remember the stars who burn bright briefly? Or only the ones who crash and burn? Number 8. Ann Sheridan. Ann Sheridan was known as the Oomph Girl, a nickname she detested, but one that stuck with her throughout her career. With her smoldering eyes, sultry voice, and unapologetic attitude, Ann was the very image of 1940s sex appeal. Audiences adored her, and studios banked on her allure to carry countless wartime films. Off-screen, she was witty, sharp-tongued, and fiercely independent, qualities rare for a woman in the studio system. But the label that made her famous also boxed her in. She longed for roles that offered depth, but Hollywood preferred to keep her in the pin-up mold. By the early 1950s, the roles dried up, and so did the publicity. Sheridan shifted to television and stage work, but never regained the spotlight she once commanded. Despite her talent and charisma, Ann died in 1967 at just 51 from esophageal cancer. Nearly forgotten by the industry she once lit up. There were no grand tributes, no retrospectives, just a quiet passing of a woman who had once been larger than life. How does someone go from being a cultural icon to a trivia question no one remembers to ask? Number 9. Ella Raines. Ella Raines wasn't your typical Hollywood starlet. With striking features, intelligent eyes, and a cool, composed screen presence, she brought something different to the screen, an air of confidence and mystery. In the 1940s, she rose quickly, starring opposite big names like Charles Laughton and Randolph Scott, and stood out in film noir classics like Phantom Lady. Critics praised her poise, her subtle strength. Audiences loved that she wasn't just a pretty face. She had edge, and often played women who knew what they wanted. But while her contemporaries cemented themselves in Hollywood history, Ella's time in the spotlight was startlingly brief. By the early 1950s, she had quietly stepped away from acting. No scandal, no dramatic downfall, just silence. Some say she walked away by choice. Others believe the roles stopped coming as Hollywood shifted focus. Either way, Ella faded from the industry just as quickly as she'd entered it. She lived out the rest of her life away from the cameras, passing in 1988 at age 67, largely forgotten by a generation that once adored her. Do you remember Ella Raines? Or has Hollywood's memory erased her too? They shined once, Brilliant, bold, unforgettable. And yet somewhere along the winding road of Hollywood history, these stars were pushed aside, their names whispered less and less with each passing year. But today, we've remembered them. We've spoken their names again. George Raft, Alan Ladd, Dane Clark, Elizabeth Scott, Turin Bay, Linda Darnell, Benita Granville, Ann Sheridan, Ella Raines. They mattered. Their work mattered. In a world obsessed with what's new and trending, let's not forget the pioneers who helped shape the glamour and grit of Golden Age Hollywood. Their stories remind us that fame is fleeting, but legacy, if we choose to preserve it, can endure. Welcome to Vintage Hollywood Files, where we uncover the beauty, the tragedy, and the shadows behind the spotlight. Thank you for watching, and if you're still here, I want to know, which forgotten star from today's list do you think deserves a comeback in modern memory? Comment their name below. And hey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell if you want more untold stories from classic cinema. Your support keeps these memories alive. See you in the next reel.